Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Radiator Arms, the car podcast that is definitely not moribund. And first off, for today's episode, I want to say a big hello to my mum, who listens to all of these podcasts and vets the many stories that I've been telling about her. And of course, for those who haven't been joining us, a big welcome from myself, James, aka JayEmm on Cars, the man in the cans, the ever-fragrant Will, aka Will the Plank.
Hello, everyone.
And to my left, the steadying hand on this wobbly old ship, it's Ant.
Hello, from SPORTZNTOURING and JayEmm and Friends, of course.
So I have a quick question. Ever fragrant, is that because, like, I smell nice or just...
Or look at this sunny, lovely disposition. You know, you walk into a room and I'm like, that's nice. That must be Will.
Ah, okay, all right. As long as it's not going, oh, God, it must be Will.
No. I haven't for the last 5 weeks been running a podcast just trying to tell you that you smell. I assure you, if you did, I would just say, Will, you smell.
Excellent.
Sort it out.
Excellent. Sponsored by Dove Deodorant.
Yeah, well, actually, on that note, you saved me from a bit of a disaster earlier because I realised I hadn't put on any deodorant this morning, and then I saw that there was a nice big bottle of salt-of-the-earth deodorant downstairs, and I was tempted to apply a little bit of that liberally to the old underarm area, and you stopped me to tell me it's in fact worth glass cleaner. So this podcast might have been done live from the hospital.
Exactly. Oh, dear.
Burn myself. Yeah. Anyway, today's episode is all about the business of YouTube, how to make it a career, if it should be a career, and the things you may or may not need to know. But before that, to get us warmed up, I'd like us each to share a little pet hate that maybe this week has been bugging us more than usual. And I'll go first. Don't know why it is, but this last week I have seen literally people with their fuel filler flap open or ajar. Now, you always see this, but I suspect in the last week or so, I have seen at least 24 people with that little filler flap at the back open. And it does grind my gears, I'll be honest.
Yeah, there is just something about it which makes you think, why didn't you look when you were leaving the pump? Or unless they've got like a button on the center console, they've accidentally pressed it. That can sometimes happen. You know, if you've accidentally been in that area and knocked it or something and going to reach like the rear window wiper or something.
Maybe. I mean, I did actually have one car that did this to me, which is my 1 Series. Anybody with an old 1 Series, they're easily forgiven because the latch basically just goes after a little while. So what I had to do is get in the car and lock it instantly, because if you locked it, it'd hold the door in place. But if you went around a bend before you got up to speed and the car then locked itself, it'd basically be stuck open, which is kind of embarrassing. And then you get reminded because every now and again the thing would just, slam against the side of the car and you go, yeah, I remember that now.
The situation you just described actually can happen very easily and has happened to me once, but I caught it before I left the fuel station on the Lamborghini Gallardo, because it's right on a row of switches right next to your hazards and your passenger window switch. So, yeah, that's happened to me once before where I accidentally pressed that.
I used to do this in the second generation Sandero that I had briefly, which was the 2019 one, because if I'm remembering this correctly, it had the boot release and the fuel filler flap release on the floor right next to you. So you'd pull it up as a lever, and sometimes you go to pull the boot and you pull the fuel filler flap. Or sometimes you do the opposite way around, then you'd be driving and it'd be going bing, 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 door opening. Like, there's not a door open. Then you'd go, oh dear, yeah, it's the boot,
well, a lot of Japanese cars tend to have a filler flap release, because most modern cars now you just sort of push the latch and it'll just push the door and it'll come open.
Pretty sure the Mark 1 MX-5 had one in the center console or something like that in the glove box area. I might be dreaming. It's
so the Alfa Romeo, I think it's the GTV, I'm sure has possibly even the boot release is in the glove box.
Excellent.
Yeah. Where you least expect it.
Excellent.
Old 911s, like air-cooled 911s, it's actually a little sort of like organ stopper type thing, and it's on the side of the filler flap, which I think for the 993, if memory serves, is for us in right-hand drive countries, the passenger side of the car. So when you pull up to the petrol station, you have to lean all the way over and give it a little bit of a tug, and the door will just flap open happily, ready for you to fill it with evermore 99 octane.
Excellent. Before I get on to my story, what about you, Ant? Anything annoyed you this week?
Oh, yes. My pet hate at the moment is people that don't know what the white circle with a diagonal black line means on British roads. Now, if you're watching or listening from outside of the UK, we have a national speed limits. Those limits are set on type of vehicle and on the type of road that you're on. But for a typical car on a country road, when you see that white circle with a diagonal black line through it, it means 60 miles an hour. However, what I've noticed is you'll come from a 40 mile an hour restricted area, and the people in a whole train, as I call it, a DRS train, if you're a Formula One fan, you'll know maybe what I'm talking about, but instead this means driving really slowly train. They'll come from a 40 and carry on at 40.
And isn't it great when they're also in a 30, they're still doing 40?
The mono speeders.
Yes.
Yeah. I love those. You'll be driving past a school for blind and particularly careless orphans in a 20 mile an hour limit. They'll do 40. Arrow straight piece of road with good visibility for 2 miles ahead, 40. And if you dare overtake them on that arrow straight piece of road, oh, so help you God, because they will vent their frustration with you, sir. Oh, they will not be happy.
So I just want to add one little detail to my story. Some time ago, I found myself in a situation where I was doing some driver training with a manufacturer to do some testing of prototypes, shall we say. And one of the things that you have to do in there is go through some of the theory for the roads, because you've got to make sure if you're taking these prototypes on the road that everyone knows all the rules of the road. And it was shocking to find out that the majority of the people in the room actually did not know what the white circle with the black line was for it.
Really?
Yeah. And I think what it is people that drive mostly in towns never see that sign. And then once in a blue moon, they'll have to leave a town or a city, and then they'll see that sign and they don't know what it means because it doesn't have a red circle with a number in it. And yeah, nobody knew. And then most of them didn't know that trucks and vans have different speed limits to cars. And they were complaining about, they're going below the speed limit and stuff like that. And it's like, well, because they have to on the motorway, for example.
They're not going below the speed limit. They're going below your speed limit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, just a general lack of understanding of basic road signs just drives me absolutely nuts, if I'm honest.
So speaking of just general lack of understanding, the A12, I think that just says everything you need to know about what's been frustrating me.
Good point. Well made.
Good point. Well made. No, you sent me on a jaunt to pick up another CRT television the other day because you've been buying more retro tech, and hopefully we're going to do a video together on some of your retro setup at some point.
Absolutely.
And but yeah, I went up to where was it you sent me again? It was
Rochford,
just about an hour and a half away from here. And my stint on the A12 was only for about 10 miles, so like that. But all I saw was
what though? Like you're talking about something that the listeners nor myself know what you mean. What happened?
Well, this is what I'm gonna go on about. So what I was suffering was just bad driving. People who were just sitting in like the second lane and they were just doing 60. Like they were like trying to overtake things, but they were not actually overtaking things.
The A12 is one of those roads that is basically proof that the devil is real. He exists.
Yes.
And he designed that piece of road because it's kind of like a greatest hits of poor motoring. You look at it and there shouldn't really be all that much wrong with it. But it's a piece of road on which, and bear in mind, the A12 is one of the major arteries from Essex into effectively London, and includes a lot of different places, Ipswich, Colchester, all that sort of stuff. And you'll have tractors on there at 8 o'clock in the morning, middle of rush hour. There'll be a tractor doing 20 mile an hour. Like, why? The number of random road closures and lane closures I've seen there for no apparent reason. And it's also one of these roads, you must have seen this before, I think everyone has, where you see a car that's had an accident And you just look at it and go, how? Like, how did you get up there? Like, what were you doing? Like, on this arrow straight piece of road, how did you possibly get it that wrong?
Is it a dual carriageway?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So when you were complaining about people sitting in the outside lane at 60,
Sorry, the second lane. Yeah, it's a dual carriageway. It's like when you see lorries overtaking each other and it takes 20 minutes.
It's like the A14. It's functionally a motorway, but not really.
Yeah. But I can tell you how these people are getting up into trees and things. One of my other pet hates is people on their mobile phones while they're driving. And this guy I was seeing was beside me. He was doing, at one point, just like going by 80 miles an hour, texting, and he was just going in and out like the lines, like waving in between the carriageways and things like that. He's in his Peugeot 207. His seat is leaned all the way back, and he's got one arm on the top like this, and the other one is texting.
I got in a bit of trouble for this a little while back. I was driving along. This is in the really, really early days of the channel. I was driving back and I saw on the road one of the vans for my dad's company.
Okay.
And I always try and give the drivers a bit of a wave and this, because every now and again it would be someone that I recognize. And I drove past and the driver was sat there texting.
Ooh.
So it's like, okay, all right. Now, my father was a principled man. This is 8-9 years ago, and Dad was very much of the opinion that for the safety of the drivers, all of the vans had Bluetooth in, because back then that was kind of unusual for vans to have. But every single new van that you ordered would always have Bluetooth, so that there'd be no excuse for the driver to have to use their phone, hold it in the hand while you're driving along. And if they needed hands-free kits or whatever, they get hands-free kits. Like, this was never ever a problem. And I basically tooted at the guy, didn't even pay attention to me. So I was like, okay, all right, fine. So I phoned Dad and said, by the way, this is after I was out of the car, of course, here's the reg of the van and here's the time I saw it, and the driver was on their phone. Because my opinion is, if I could drive past them and see them, a police officer could have done.
Yeah.
And even though they're going to get a very stern talking to from my father, that's a far less serious thing than had a police officer pulled them over, because that might ultimately have led to them losing their job, because they might have lost their license.
Yeah. It also, like, some people might have an issue with that, but like, what would you do if you saw them driving drunk? Like,
yeah, no, I think there's a responsibility. Also, I occasionally got to borrow Dad's vans, sometimes for work, sometimes for I needed to move house. Dad, can I borrow a van for the weekend? It's one of the best things about knowing somebody that's got vans. And as far as I saw it, when I was behind the wheel of one of his vans, it's all sign written up, so the company name is all over it. You behave a very different way to if you're just driving about in your car, because you're representing somebody's business. Now, in that case, it's somebody else that's very close to me, but it doesn't actually matter. When you are doing something for somebody else, you're representing them. And so you have to drive in a manner that is appropriate. Anyway, I dobbed him in, and it turned out that it was one of my sister's friends. I was not very popular for quite some time after that. But I maintain that I was in the right, because I think anything could have happened, and it could have been a much, much worse situation. And if that was the wake-up call that they needed, cool, great.
I'm sure that now your sister will realise that you did the right thing, because it actually saved that person from potentially losing their licence in the future. So I think you did the right thing as well.
Yeah, I think so too, but she was not happy anyway.
Yeah, that was just at the time.
Yeah.
It's all good now.
Indeed. Don't really care, to be honest.
So we've had our rants today. We've got everything out that we need to. But we want to know your rants. So we have an email address, don't we?
We do. It's landlord@theradiatorarms.com.
Yeah, we need you to write in and let us know what you've seen on the roads recently, or just anything automotive that has been grinding your gears. And we can all have a collective grumble together, and we'll share some of the best ones that we read on the podcast in some of the next episodes.
Yeah. So, the business of YouTube.
And I think specifically focusing on car YouTube as well, I think car YouTube is a different thing to a lot of other YouTube.
There will be certain things that will be applicable in a fairly universal fashion here. There'll be other things that are very much specific to, let's call it, automotive YouTube. There are also things, and this is where it does get tricky for me, that maybe were valid pieces of advice when I started that no longer are. And there are also things that now you can do that just weren't available to creators near 10 years ago. But before we start, I was trying to think about this. Did you, Will, actually start YouTube before I did?
2006.
Oh, yeah, then yes,
And
very much so.
I was one of the first people in the UK to actually get a YouTube partnership in 2009. I got over the 1,000 subscriber mark then. And I got partnership. I was getting emails from the creation program. So I don't remember it well, but it was the early days of Google AdSense and things like that. So yeah, it was when I was 18 years old, and it was quite an interesting time because people weren't like putting sponsorships in their videos. There was no kind of product placement stuff back then. It was very much a case of actually a lot of people were getting upset with you, the fact that you're making money off this. You should be doing this for your passion for free and things like that. I remember having comments from people. I don't know if I'll be able to dig them up. I've got a lot of emails from back then. If I can, we'll get some overlaid. If not, I'm sorry in advance. But we got a lot of comments from people saying, "Oh, you shouldn't be sponsorship taking money from this kind of thing. Why are you better than us? Why are you doing that? This isn't TV. This isn't real media. It's all just things on the internet. Like, you shouldn't be paid." Even back then, people like, you shouldn't be paid for your hard work.
I've always found that fascinating. I mean, that is a comment that you still get now, is you should be doing this for nothing. You're like, okay, let me get this straight. You want me to go somewhere using fuel that I put in my car, using camera kit that I have bought, filmed and edited using lessons that I learned over a couple of years of film school, and also then subsequently many years of working in the real world. So, a decade's worth of knowledge on a computer that is not inexpensive, with software that historically was quite expensive. And you want me to do all of this, put this all together, which is a process that takes some considerable time, even when you're very good at it. And you want me to do this for nothing. I mean, I will admit that over the years, there are certain attitudes I had that I've softened on.
I'm sure we're all the same.
But there are others where I have firmed up my stance. And one of those is ad blockers. Because first off, I think people have this really unrealistic view of, they go and watch YouTube stuff, and there are advertisements on it. Like when they used to open a magazine and there'd be advertisements in there. I mean, Ant and I were actually having this very discussion the other day, because for those that live or lived in London, you might be familiar with the concept of the free newspaper.
Yep. Yeah, and exactly. There's a number of newspapers in London. One of the first ones was called The Metro, and they pretty much blew all of the other newspapers out of the water because they gave it away for free. Now, previously, you had to pay for the newspaper, but it was like, 50p or 60p or 90p, depending on the paper. All that really covered was like the cost of the actual physical paper itself. They paid for the journalists and for the editing and for the
offices and everything else.
Offices and all that stuff.
The overheads.
From advertising. And so these folks figured that, well, actually, we could get way higher distribution and therefore way higher revenue by just giving the paper away for free rather than trying to sell it. And they did, and they forced, I think it was the Evening Standard, into a position where they then had to give it away for free.
Paper, the London Light. I mean, it was genius because it's actually a very similar model in some ways to what YouTube does, because there's no cost of entry, there's no fee you have to pay to watch. Like, you are already paying by watching. Yeah, and it's the same with the newspapers. Also, I think in the particular case of the Metro, which is aimed at, as the name implies, people going onto the London Underground, even that act, I think, of stopping to put money in to get a paper is probably enough for somebody to go, I'm not going to get the paper today. This is, of course, before contactless payment and all this sort of stuff. You had to get physical money out of your pocket in here. Whereas when you then walk past the stack of papers and they're just there, plus, and it was always hard to work out, your readership is much, much higher than the number of papers you actually print. Because when you're done with the paper in the morning, you sling it behind your head on the tube, someone walks in and they then see the paper, get their reader. I remember there was a German paper called Bild, which is a very sort of trashy kind of silly paper. So somewhere between, I think, maybe the Sun and the Sunday Sport. It wasn't exactly high-class journalism. But they estimated that their readership was about 4 times the print numbers, just because every paper is going to get read by several people through the day.
I was going to say, I think you get that with any newspaper, because my mum gets a copy of, I can't remember what it is, I think it's the Daily Mail, off my aunt. And when they're done with it, they share it around a few members of the family, and then everybody reads it. And then it used to end up as a cat letter for me.
So in PR, it's called OTS. Opportunities to see. So different types of publications have different OTS numbers. Like for a newspaper or magazine, I think it's like 2.3 or something like that average opportunities to see, or something along those lines. And the assumption is that, exactly that will happen, that the person that buys it will read it and then they'll give it to someone else who will read it. I think the OTS on the free newspapers was even higher than that. So when I learned about this, when I was managing Damani's, my son's racing career, from a PR company that we ended up actually doing some work in conjunction with, but then later ended up working together. And they were explaining to me how to calculate the different impressions that we were getting in print, because you don't have the same analytics as you have in
YouTube,
in YouTube or Instagram or whatever. So yeah, and that's how I learned about that. Fun fact, I actually worked on Built's original website.
Excellent.
It was an interesting experience. The company that was actually developing it hit up against a particular challenge, and I happened to be an expert in that area, in that particular software, so they flew me out. I actually didn't know anything about it. They called it the yellow press. I was like, I was thinking the newspaper is yellow, so it must be that. And I got there and I discovered it had nothing to do with classified ads.
When was the last time when you guys read a newspaper?
I bought a copy of, I think it's the Sunday Sport.
Speaking of Built,
When I was coming home from Manchester, I told the story recently. I'd taken my mum's husband to go see a football game there, and I just stopped off at a petrol station. I didn't realise the Sport was still a going concern, and it had 2 headlines. The big one. The big one, which attracted me, and I've still got it. I think I keep it beside the bed because it just makes me smile whenever I see it. The big headline was, I accidentally wiped my bum on a winning lottery ticket. But my personal favourite was the story, I think, that you could then follow on page 4, which was, sex-starved aliens stole my slippers.
Have any of you ever been in the newspaper?
I mean, no, I don't think so. I'm concerned for you now. Have you?
Oh, I've been in the newspaper. I've been in it a few times, actually.
Not the Sport.
Not I haven't been on page 3, I'm sorry to say. No, I've been for a few things. I remember I was in a couple of local newspapers. One for my first girlfriend's prom. Which was, everybody took photos. So people came around, the journalists took photos of the kids going to prom and stuff like that. And it was quite amusing because there I am sitting with my girlfriend at the time, and I've got this luscious long hair and I'm looking like a real rock star as well. That was about 2009. Then I was in it with my dad, because my dad's a musician, and we were doing something with the guys from Radio Suffolk where we'd been teaching them how to play Eddie Floyd's, I think it's Eddie Floyd's Knock on Wood, and they were completely like amateur musicians. We got them up here, we recorded it, and that was then all put live on the radio and everything. That was good fun. So we're in the paper for that. And then a couple of years ago I was in it with one of my bands, because we were doing some local shows, and as somebody took an interest who was a junior reporter and took some photos of us, and we were in there with the band. And so yeah, nothing major, like no scandals, but I have been in the newspaper.
I've got 3.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. The first one was music related as well.
Yep.
When I was at school, I won a music competition at the school that ended up getting featured in the local newspaper.
Excellent.
In Wimbledon. I actually found the photo from that the other day, so I'll see if I can dig that out again. Well, I don't know if I want to share it, actually. It's so embarrassing. Anyway, the second thing was I was just being quoted on my opinion on something in tech. That's my other thing that I do, working in tech, software engineering and that sort of thing. And the third time was because of Damani's racing, we ended up getting featured in the Daily Star. Yeah.
That's still cool, though.
Take it where you get it.
Yeah.
I think, now thinking back of it, I had a
And
photograph.
the Telegraph, sorry. And the Telegraph. And the Telegraph.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I had a photograph of some plants in my nan's garden I took on an old black and white film that got featured in like the, reader's photo of the day type thing, but I sort of don't get that. I have had stuff that I've filmed also on the news, and I also have had now my stuff that I've shot on TV. It's quite funny because back when I was starting out, I'll try and get us somewhat on topic, but I think all of this is interesting stuff. My dad said, James, because I was previously a cameraman and James was my name, he said, James, why didn't you phone up Wheeler Dealers or Car SOS or something like that and ask if they've got a cameraman? It's like, well, thank you for your suggestion, Dad, but as you may or might not have noticed by the fact that you've seen the program, they've already got one. In fact, they've probably got several. And me phoning up with the experience that I've got, which wasn't particularly relevant because I came more from a dramatic background as opposed to a non-fiction one, they're probably not really going to be interested in me. But yeah, cheers, I'll take your suggestion on board and then instantly forget about it. Amusingly and ironically, many years later, I have then been contacted, I think, by both Wheeler Dealers and Car SOS, and I have actually sold them footage that I have taken. In fact, I've supplied a number of different productions now. I had one in early COVID. I had a guy message me. This is the first time this happened. I had a guy message me on Facebook. On a Sunday afternoon, I was out filming with a trio of GTRs. I'd managed to sort of make one of those just magic days where I'd managed to line up, and I'd never driven any of them, R32, 33, and 34 Nissan Skyline GTRs, and I was driving them all back to back. So this guy messaged me and said, hi, James, I'm an editor and I'm putting together a series and we need footage of, and he listed like a couple of cars. I've seen that you've done some videos with them. Would you be able to get in touch with me about this? It's relatively urgent, yada, yada. He left a phone number. I Googled his name and saw that that was a legit person in media. And I thought, crikey, sending me a message on Facebook on a Sunday afternoon is pretty unconventional. This must mean if he's real, he's desperate.
Yeah.
So while we were at lunch, I phoned him and said, yeah, hello, this is me. Got your message. I imagine you're desperate. And he's like, yes, I am. I said, okay, what do you need? He said, I need some footage of this and this. And I said, okay, that's fine. Like, what format do you want it in? What codec? What res? You tell me where you want it. And he was just, you could tell that he was a man absolutely delighted because he's like, oh, thank goodness. Like someone that understands how to get stuff sent over and how to deliver footage and everything else and what is broadcast grade and what isn't and this, that, and the other. And I said, yeah, look, I used to work in film TV, so I understand the technical side of it. I said, do you happen to need anything else? And he said, well, have you got a list of the cars that you filmed? I was like, well, not really, but if you've got a list of the cars you need footage of, send it to me. And what had happened is they were doing a series. I can't even remember what it was called. It was like a 5 or 6 part series. And you see these programs all the time, but in COVID times, they became very popular. And what it was is it was like a best cars ever, and one episode is on like rally cars, one episode is on like hot hatchbacks, that type of thing. And they got a few sort of kind of popular here celebrity people to just sit on a sofa, tell me what your favorite hot hatch is, and then they'll go off and find footage. And it's actually a really efficient, really easy way to make a program. They had a deal with Petrolicious to provide footage.
I've heard of that company.
Yeah, Petrolicious used to do, and they've recently come back, some really amazing like readers' rides type stuff, beautifully shot, really, really nice stuff, very arty. However, at the time, their then boss had made some ill-informed comments, let's just put it that way, and that led to the company more or less folding. And part of the collateral damage of that was this contract these guys had to supply all of this footage went by the wayside. So he's got a program that needs to go out in 2 weeks' time, for which he's now missing 70% of all the material that he needs. And because it's COVID times, they can't just go out and make some more, or not easily anyway. So I said, yeah, I've got footage for, a whole bunch of different cars, and I've got probably about 80% of the stuff that you're looking for. I've got footage that you can use. And he said, yeah, cool. Okay, send it over. We'll tell you what we use, and I'll share it with you now. Discovery pay £25 a second.
Ooh.
So sending them, like, I think I wound up selling them 1.5 minutes of footage. That paid for Christmas.
So this is an important thing to also notice, talk about people who might be getting into YouTube. If you can, and you have the ability to store it, back up and keep copies of your source material, because you never know if something like this might be required. And it's not just the car space either. There's so many times where people could have footage of things that other companies, media people need to use, and you can sell that footage. You can license it to them.
Yeah,
so
because it might sound expensive, but this is actually the cheapest way for them to make this kind of material, because they know that you have the rights. They know that you have the license for it. I used some of the money to buy the people whose cars was featured some nice little goodies, like there was a nice book on the GTR, so I bought a few copies of those from another fan of the channel who'd sent me a copy of it. Really, really great book. If you're into the Nissan GTR, particularly the older cars, it's called GTR The Journey, and it's just fantastic coffee table reading. So that's a great thing. And so, yeah, it's just stuff like that is little things that you often don't think of. And even today, I will go back and access footage from the very, very beginnings of YouTube that's still useful in edits, just because there isn't everything on the internet. Sometimes you need shots of something really particularly weird and obscure, or more often than not now, I will be talking about another car that I have driven, and there's a very good chance that that car may be a unique example. Or so we were talking earlier about media sites. So most car companies, if you're going to do YouTube, they have a media site. So I have a strict policy, okay? And this is for anybody that's thinking of starting a new YouTube channel, and this is not just car related, but apply it in your own way. When you're starting out, sometimes it's not very obvious how you get footage of stuff that you haven't already made your own, video of. Let's say you want a shot of an old 911, say. Now, there's a couple of easy ways you can get that footage. The first is you go on Wikipedia or the Wikimedia site, because there will be on there shots of a whole bunch of different, everything, to be honest. And most of the stuff on there comes with some form of Creative Commons license, which in short means you can use that in your product with restriction. And generally the restriction is that you have to give the correct accreditation. Read, make sure you understand this, but that's the short version. The other way to get this footage or photos or whatever you need is on the manufacturer's own website. So Porsche have an amazing site because they have shots of more or less everything that they've ever made going back throughout the whole history of the company. Other firms, let's say, for example, Noble, they don't really have a media website, not one that I've found, and the photos that they do have on the website, the website, to be honest, in general is hilarious, because if you go on the Noble website, the first thing that it'll tell you is there'll be a big pop-up telling you that, by the way, a few years ago, they forgot to renew their website in the USA, and then somebody in the States basically stole their trademark because they basically just slept on it, which is, I think, to be honest, their own fault. And I love the professionalism of going on a car company's website, and the first thing you're told is, by the way, we forgot to renew our trademark, so we lost it in the States, or something to that effect anyway. That's classic. They're also telling you all about a car that you can't even buy anymore. There's loads of stuff about the M600, which is not in production anymore and hasn't been for quite some time. So, yeah, that's the sort of stuff where Wikipedia is really, really handy. The other place you might be able to get footage, and this is always where temptation will come from, is other people's videos. Now, we all as content creators, I think, have experienced this. I've certainly had it quite a bit, where you either need footage for a video and you can't find what you need from anywhere other than an existing YouTube video. So what you do in that circumstance, because apparently this isn't very clear, is you find the video that you want. On that video, there will almost certainly be a way to contact the content creator. It may be an Instagram feed, it may be Facebook, it may be LinkedIn, or it may just be an email address. If you go on the channel and hit the About bit, there'll often be an email address there. And you just send them a message and say, hello, here's me. I'm doing a video on this. I would like to use some footage that you've got of this, and I will, of course, credit you. Is that okay? Now, my moral compass says that if you want to use some footage like that, you email, you give time to respond, and hopefully you will get a response, and it'll be in the affirmative, and use the footage. If you have tried, and if you have exhausted every method that you can, and it seems appropriate, and it's not contentious, then use the footage, make sure to give appropriate credit, and you've done the best that you possibly can to make sure that you've got in touch with that person. Because sometimes you get dormant channels, sometimes the creator's just given up. It's become the media equivalent of abandonware. Nobody really cares about it. Nobody really owns it anymore. We were talking recently about the old Clarkson VHS tapes and the music on them. I spent a long, long time trying to track down who actually owns the rights to some of this music. And the genuine answer is that I'm not sure anybody knows, because the company that made it, they might have either owned the rights or they might have leased the rights. And then the person that wrote it, I'm not sure if they're even still with us, so they can't be asked directly. And then the company that produced the actual tape in its original guise, they got taken over by another company, which got taken over by another company, which got taken over by another company, but itself is now dormant. It gets really confusing very quickly. Anyway, so if you want to use footage, you just ask.
Yeah. And I think, if you do that, you have to understand that you do run the risk that somebody might then see what you've done later and then suddenly care about it. And you are running the risk of your video basically being taken down.
Correct.
Now, I think if someone asked me, I would just say, yeah, go for it. As long as you put on-screen accreditation. And when you say appropriate, it's not right the way down, a 400-word essay in your description. It's on-screen accreditation. And if someone did use my footage and I saw that, I would be like, look, you should have got in touch, but I'll let this one go. Next time, make sure you check with me first. But what really annoys me, and I see this happen with your footage a lot, is I'll be watching a video and I'm like, I recognize that shot. I might have even driven the car on the day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's James's. Hang on, James, did this person get in touch with you? Like, nope. And it's just, and I think there's this weird thing that people have about content. And I think it's for a few different reasons. One of them, I think, is modern smartphones. They have great cameras on them. So people film stuff and they think, well, filming's free, right? And I think the other thing is that when you're at school or even college or stuff like that, you're doing an assignment, you're almost actively encouraged to take stuff from the internet and include it in your assignment without any explanation as to how copyright works. And I know this because I had to speak to one of my son's teachers once to say, you do know that the instructions you gave are encouraging, copyright theft. And they were like, oh no, it's on the internet. You can just use it. Like, no. Just because it's free to consume doesn't mean it's free to use. It's a different thing. I said, you've actually taught all of these kids copyright theft. And I think it's fine because of the context you're using it in. It's probably okay. But what you should be explaining is that the only reason I'm suggesting you do this is because we're only using it for this internal assignment that's never going to be published. However, if you were to do this for something that's going to be published, then you would have to go through this process of licensing the content.
I have an interesting story about that, actually. I think people see on YouTube, there's a lot of compilations these days of things, and they generally will either take the clips with no credit, or they might just put credit on there and they haven't spoken to anybody. I had a video probably about a decade ago, maybe a little bit more now, I had a Peugeot 106 1.5D diesel. And I put onto that a back box from I think it was a Sportex or a Pug Sport back box on that. And I got some clips of that car driving away, and you could hear the exhaust and it doing some flyby shots. Now, one of them, and this was on a second channel. This is a channel I haven't been logged into years, so they could have contacted me. I have no idea. But I remember one day, one of my friends, I think it was my friend Harry, messaged me and said, "That's your footage. I'm pretty sure that's your footage of that." And it was. It's a compilation of like some of the slowest naturally aspirated diesels in the world, and it was of like the 1.5 NA 60 horsepower Peugeot 106, and it just happened to have a shot of my car going by and the exhaust noise. But it gets weirder than that. A few years later, he also messaged me again and said, "I recognise the sound of the exhaust in this clip. Is this yours?" And somebody had overlaid the exhaust sound of that diesel car from the video over a rally car going by. So you got the noise of this Peugeot 106 1.5 diesel with a fart cannon on it going over a rally car. Because obviously I've got perfect pitch and things and I can hear and I can compare. I was like, yeah, that is my clip. That is it, note for note, the engine doing everything. So it's just amazing what people think they can get away with on the internet. It's quite funny.
That's incredible. So, serious question for you, Will. Obviously, you started in YouTube a decade before I did. Was that the tech channel, the Will the Plank?
Well, it was Will, but that wasn't tech then. That was vlogging. Back in the day, people now early YouTube, I don't know how much time you spent on it, was really just it was very the editing wasn't big. A lot of it, some of the videos that people watch were just one video recorded from start to finish on an old like VHS camcorder, something like that, or on a webcam. In fact, I've actually got nearly all the videos I did in 2006, 2007 on my computer still, because they're in WMV, was it?
Yeah,
media format,
media, yeah.
320 by 240, something like that.
And I've got Vision.
Exactly. I've got all of those original videos, and they were just me rambling about tech, rambling about music and things like that. I mean, I look back at them now and I can't make it more than 5 seconds through. Those videos don't exist online anymore.
So why did you stop?
Well, I didn't stop straight away. I started doing tech a bit later. I actually ended up stopping because I don't really know. I think I got a bit scared. I know this sounds weird. I remember having a video which went viral back then, which was about 100,000 views.
Yeah.
And the comments were horrendous. And that you were getting the death threats and everything. The content was rubbish, but it still doesn't warrant death threats.
What was it? What were you doing?
I don't even remember. People just didn't like me, which is fair enough.
It wasn't like, here's 5 interesting ways to burn this flag.
No, it was just nothing like that. It was just like this was before comment filters and things like that, and where it was really anonymous and people were like not being held accountable, for these kind of things. And I just remember just turning off and stopping for a while. I took all my videos down for a while as well. And the sad thing for me is there's a possibility I could have got fairly large in the YouTube space back then, because it was a less saturated market. And I had a few of these things. I had it with tech as well. In fact, I had a series on an E32 750IL in 2014 that my dad and I had basically been given, and were doing it up. And I went through the first drive. This car had been off the road for like 10 years. And I think that got like 60, 70,000 views then. And the preceding videos were. And I had to stop doing that series because my dad was funding it, and I wasn't making any money from YouTube at that time. And this is the thing, we're going to talk about this in project cars later. We've got another episode coming about first project cars. The first project car you want definitely isn't a 750IL with a V12, which requires 2 computers to run it, and everything is expensive. Basically, it needed a radiator, it needed the ignition system run through. It was going to cost about £400 or £500, and I'd have to put some brake hose and bits on it. My dad said at the time, this car isn't even worth £1,000. We're not doing it. Yeah. The funding was cut. So I had people banging on the virtual doors the next episode, and I had to go to them, yes, sorry, it's been cancelled. I'm not allowed to do this. And I tell you what, people were not happy.
The entitlement that you get in the comments for these things. It's just amazing.
So that stopped I stopped about 2017, I think. And I was doing tech stuff then. I stopped and I removed most stuff from the channel, and I said, you know what? I'm also in a place in my life where I wasn't doing great, and I also was having to focus a lot of changes happening in my life, a lot of work, financial, health, things like that, and I just said, no, this is it. I can't do this kind of thing. And then, that's kind of why I stopped. But I did start again about the end of 2022. The channel is still up there, actually. It was a channel called Tatty Old Cars, and that is where the original revival videos of my Maestro still exist. I'm not using that channel anymore. I'm not using the Instagram handle. I decided to keep it all on the Wilver Plank where I'm doing stuff, and also on the JayEmm and Friends channel where we're doing automotive videos, and we've just had a lovely one come out where me and Ant go for a ride in the Maestro, and we've got a working video on the Golf where it's having a facelift coming up soon and things like that. So my automotive stuff is here with all of you to enjoy. But I started that channel up and I did the revival after I pulled the Maestro out the barn, and then I got it going, went through the whole process. And I did that for about a year. I was kind of only really doing that video for me to enjoy, but people liked it. I think the whole series got about 100,000 views, something like that maybe. But then I stopped because, as you know where I am here, it's not great to film videos, especially during the day. And I kind of realised I tried to go out and film things and couldn't film. So I stopped. But now, with the help of you guys, I've actually got places I can come and film stuff, which is great. So I did the tech stuff again, started that off last year in about April time, and I've been playing about with the computers again and just enjoying nothing too serious, and people enjoy it. The monetization is back on the channel. I've had some good viewed videos, and I've gained another 600-700 subscribers in that time, I think. I'm over the 2,000 mark on that channel now. And I need to post something on there because I've been very busy with other stuff, but it's one of those. But from my perspective, having seen the whole YouTube landscape change from when I started and when I got originally monetized, lost monetization, got it back on a couple of occasions, and to where it is now, it is so different. It was so much luck of the draw then, and even more now. The fact that you, James, even in 2016, even managed to get where you are now is incredibly lucky.
Yeah, so it's something that people often ask, and I asked myself when I was starting out, is there any space left for anybody new?
Yes.
Now, there's something very good about cars, which is that it's very high effort. So it's very high price of entry, because if you want to do a gaming channel, you probably already possess much of the stuff that you need. If you've got a computer and you've got an internet connection, you can do a gaming channel.
But the interesting about gaming channels is because there's so many of them. This is probably about the car world as well. Your biggest selling point is yourself, your personality.
Yeah.
If you're very kind of bland and monotonal and kind of like that, you know, unless there's some other quirk or feature about you, shout out Doug DeMuro, that makes you interesting, then you're probably not gonna get very far.
Yeah. It's one of the things that I tell people. There was a chap I know, and he put a bit of a rant out. He has a small YouTube channel, but it's not his job. He just does it as a bit of fun. And he had a little bit of a rant where he basically said, I don't really understand all these car YouTubers because, you know, it's very clear to me that most of them can't really drive for toffee. And I've done all the advanced driver training. I've done all the track training. You know, I'll be quicker around a track than any of them. And yet my videos don't really get any views. And so I said, well, have you considered acting lessons? And clearly in his head, he thought that the only thing that should be a requisite to make a driving channel is being able to drive really, really well. And there are very famous presenters out there who can both drive and present. Tiff Niddell, Chris Harris, to give you just two. But I would argue that some of the best known faces in the car world aren't the best drivers. Clarkson would tell you that he is not the best driver in the world. He's still probably a much better driver than most people because of the experience that he's had, but he's an excellent presenter. And that's what people go in for. And I'll get people every now and again message people like, oh, hey, James, I just started out on YouTube. Can you give me a look at the channel and, you know, give me your opinion? Now, the first thing I will always ask them is, are you doing this for a little bit of fun? Or are you doing it because you really want to be a YouTuber? Do you want this to be your career? Now, if they're just telling me they're doing it for a little bit of fun, whatever it is, you go, that's lovely. Congratulations. Well done. They're there, you know. But if they say, I want this to be my job, and you click on the video and they go, hi, my name's Dave. Today I'm driving a BMW. It's great. It's green. Nice, it's blue. Yeah, it's a BMW. They're from Germany. I don't really like German cars. You're just going to have to go and be like, Dave, I'm really sorry, mate. Like, this is not the career for you. Like, just don't. Instead, what you want is, hi, everybody. I'm Dave. Today, we're out in this Beamer. Now, it could be green, could be blue. I don't really care. All I want to know is if it puts a smile on my face. You need to be engaged. You need to be pulled in to what you're watching. You have to be a personality. You have to be a presenter. I always get people going, yeah, why do you act and talk the way that you do when you present your videos? And my answer is usually, go and watch one of my old ones. For some reason, I have a cold in all of them. Honestly, I don't know why. I have watched a few of my old videos and it's like, hi, my name's James. Today we're driving a Honda Civic Type R. I don't know what the hell was going on. I genuinely not got a clue.
You are much more chilled as well. I'm like, but the end of the day is, if you're ever wondering why does someone on YouTube do something, if they've got a growing or successful channel already, then I guarantee you it's because in the analytics it said that video did really well, that video didn't. I'll do more like that one, and that's how it is at the end of the day. Also, if you ever complain about clickbait, stop clicking on clickbait videos, because if everyone stopped clicking on clickbait videos, no one would make clickbait.
No, it's true.
It's all from the analytics. So we only do what the analytics tell us you want.
There's another big thing I've learned from hanging around you guys is it's not just personality, it's also the flow of your video. That I've learned is very, very important, because you could have a video that's 10 minutes long and it might not get as many views as a video that's an hour long, but the video that's an hour long, if it has been chopped up and made seamless into a way where there's not loads of dead air, there's not loads of boring bits, and it's flowing really nicely, that will captivate people's kind of like interest far more than a 10-minute video on the same subject that is a bit boring. There's a lot of kind of nothing happening, a lot of silence and a lot of fiddling and things. That's a big thing with the electronic stuff. When I edit my video, I did an hour-long video on a Sega Dreamcast that you gave me. And while I enjoyed that, after spending some time talking to you, you basically said that video could be half as long, and that video did terrible. And if I did it again now, I can guarantee that it would have much better engagement. The engagement that was rubbish, therefore it didn't get pushed out to as many people, therefore barely anybody saw it. That is what it is.
Because it's one of these things as well where sometimes people say what they want, but they don't really know what they want. You always have to pay attention to the comment section, because there is always interesting stuff in there. Even if sometimes it's not delivered in the most subtle or polite of ways, there is always interesting information to be gleaned from the comment section. Now, in the early days, one of the biggest complaints, and this was on all of my videos, was these videos are too long. I don't tend to get those complaints anymore. My videos aren't shorter. In fact, many of them are longer. What hasn't changed is the duration. What has changed is the pace. 2 words, Matt Armstrong. You want to know one of the reasons he's so successful? His editing. Now, it's not too hyperactive, it's not too insane, it's not how I would edit a video, but for what he's doing and his audience, it absolutely works. Now, what I also personally dislike, and this comes from a formal editing background and a formal training background, is I do see a lot of people's videos now, and it's very, very common, where you can see that the performance that they delivered wasn't actually a particularly engaging one. What's happened is it's been edited to within an inch of its life. You'll see where even not a whole second has been pulled out of the edit, because whoever's editing it has decided they just want to cut the thing to within an inch of its life, so that it doesn't even flow, actually. It's just fast,
jarring.
it's hyperactive, it's really jarring, it's really unpleasant to watch. And it's a kind of particular style, but I don't think it's one that's going to hang around for that long, because it's quite grating to watch. It's quite tiring. And yeah, very rapid fire. And I think people do it because you're like, yeah, this presenter is not actually that good. Let's just try and make them exciting in post. And yeah, not going to happen.
You see lots of jump cuts in those, like literally like a single sentence is like the person's hands are here and then suddenly they're here and then suddenly they're here, suddenly they're here. Because they just keep doing these jump cuts between every few words. I have to admit though, my delivery, when I'm driving, I still have a problem where I have quite a lot of pauses in between parts of my sentence, like I just did, and I do sometimes have to cut them out. But I'll hide them with a little cutaway to a different angle.
This was actually another thing I was going to mention. One thing you taught me, James, that is really important is that if you can, deliver the entire line in one go, because then you can do what you do. Is people who watch James's videos will notice that every time he's finished with something, there's either an overlay shot or there is an angle change significant enough for it to, say that this is a new part of the sentence. But it's not like jump cuts, because in certain things that I do in videos, because I'm single camera when I'm working on tech, I kind of have to do jump cuts, especially when you're single camera. You can kind of hide them, as you've said, some way, maybe some zoom in, some overall shots, things like that. I think for certain content, that's fine. But I think for the style of content you do, if you tried to jump cut, that just wouldn't work. That would be so jarring.
But we are veering off into how to make good content. And I'm not sure that we've covered as much of the business of YouTube as we probably should have. So far, what we have talked a little bit about is getting monetized. So there are some limitations on getting monetized. So you have to have 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watch hours within the last 12 months, or now in the era of shorts, 10 million shorts views in the last 3 months also can get you monetized with your 1,000 subscribers. Even then, it's not a lot of money. Some people complain that, oh, well, if they're making money off of my videos, then, by putting ads on it, then I should get a cut of that. Trust me, it's not even worth it. And secondly, you got to remember that YouTube is providing a platform where I would say billions by now of software engineering effort has gone into it. The infrastructure to deliver, even to host the volume of video content that they actually host now. I can't remember, it's like years worth of video content is uploaded every minute or something crazy like that. So they're hosting your videos for free. So they should get the money up to a point. And I think this is, my estimate is that they've calculated that once you're at around that 4,000 watch hours, that's when your video content is breaking even for them. That's the point at which they can allow you to start actually taking
There's
a cut
actually
of the money.
something else. There's another reason they did it. Because when I started, you could monetize whenever you wanted to. You could monetize more or less immediately. This is an event that's happened a couple of times. It's something called the adpocalypse.
Oh, yeah.
Now, what happened and what forced the change whereby you have to meet these criteria for becoming monetized is a few years back, it was discovered that because anyone and everyone could get their channel monetized, a company's advertisements could be played on effectively any video. And some videos were being uploaded that were of, let's just call them, a contentious nature, or that may not have been suitable for all audiences. Some of which were maybe just distasteful, some of which were downright inflammatory, and I think shouldn't have a place online, and certainly not in a family accessible site. Problem is, with so many users out there, YouTube struggled to find a way to moderate it. So by putting in this fairly low threshold, at which point your channel becomes monetized, they made their life easier, because now they could go, okay, if you look at the number of channels on YouTube, I think a disproportionate number are these micro channels that are sort of below 1,000 subscribers. And so if we no longer have to worry about moderating them, we've just got to keep the sponsors happy. They made their life a lot easier. That is what happened. All right. So something I know that people always want to know: how do you actually make money off YouTube? All right. And the second question is usually, how much money are you making off YouTube? Well, I'll answer the first one first. There are two main ways that you make money off YouTube. The first is what's known as AdSense revenue. So you watch a video on YouTube, and unless you have YouTube Premium or you're using an ad block, in which case you can get in the bin, then you will see an advertisement. Now, exactly when this advertisement will play, what the advertisement is, varies depending on a great number of factors. And for anybody that's ever been forced to sit through a 2-minute unskippable ad in the minute of one of my videos, I am very sorry. We as content creators do not have the control over exactly what ad or what kind of ad is played. The type of ad is actually more to do with you than it is with us, because using cookies and various other things that I really have never fully understood, the internet knows what it is that you've been looking at. The example I always use is vacuum cleaners. And it gets more complicated too, because if you're looking at a video of an old Maestro, there's a good chance it'll play you an advert for a Henry Hoover. But if you're looking at a video for a Ferrari, there's a good chance it might try and flog you a 500 quid Dyson, because it knows what is a premium product. Now, obviously, somebody has paid to play that advertisement. For the sake of argument, let's just call it a penny. The reality is that it's a much smaller number than that. If it were a penny, I'd be a very happy man indeed.
It's a fraction of a penny.
It's a fraction of a penny. I will then get 55% of that penny. Now, that doesn't sound like very much, and the reality is it's much smaller than that, but the way it works is simple quantity. You get enough people all giving you 55% of a penny, and then you can obviously earn a living out of it. The other way that you earn money is by integrations. So when I say, hi, welcome to the Radiator Arms presented by Nove Watches, then somebody has come to us and said, we like you, we like your brand, let's have a chat. We would like you to say this about our product, for which we're going to pay you some money. So on the main channel, I have Nove Watches, Dodo Juice, and Car Vertical, companies that I work with, and they pay me money to promote their services. And I think as long as you are clear and transparent about the fact that that is a transactional relationship, you're not just chucking their name out there out of the goodness of your heart. They are, of course, all companies that I work with and all companies that whose products I would use. That's very important. Of course, not everybody is the same way. And I think there is a big difference between journalist and influencer. And the difference really simply is that an influencer will take money from anyone for anything, regardless of whether it's actually a good product or one they're ever going to use. Whereas a journalist, I'm never going to take money from a car company because I'm reviewing their products. The moment you take a penny from that company, then you have effectively dented forever, I think, your journalistic credentials. It is why I made a big fuss recently about being offered money by JayEmm to drive one of their cars. Hilariously, I didn't even talk about this on the main channel. I actually got an email about 3 weeks later from BYD saying, oh, hi, James. Based on some of your recent content, we think you'd be a great fit for us. We want you to come and do some stuff with BYD. How much money do you want? I mean, they were that direct.
Yeah. And as they obviously hadn't been paying attention to your most recent content, because there's quite a well-viewed video explaining exactly why you would not take money from a car manufacturer. But you're taking money from companies that would market to the people that are interested in your car reviews, and you would never review those products, so it's fine. But I think it's terrible, James, that you would even think about taking any money at all. I mean, I think what you should do is just have a full-time job, a proper job, you know, where you can get underpaid and overworked, and then somehow, outside of that 40 hours a week or 50 hours a week for a lot of people, sometimes 60, somehow you should just find the time to do another full-time job and then another 50, 60, 70 hour a week job of creating content. Surely anyone could do that.
I like to quote to people something that I often said in the world of film, where when you're starting out, you'll invariably do a lot of stuff for typically expenses only. And they'll want you to come and do their film for them for what is ultimately free, quote unquote, for the exposure. and always remind them that exposure is a cause of death. I cannot pay my rent with exposure. I cannot fill my car's petrol tank with exposure, but I can die of it.
Oh, yeah. You get the same thing as a musician, because I'm also a musician as well. And the amount of time, like in the early days, perhaps when you're just starting out in a band, you might do a couple of gigs just to get yourself off your feet and have the chance to go play some things. And more, if anything, it is just for you as a band to learn how you mesh with each other on stage, live, blah, 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 how your gear works, how your sound is, get a bit of experience. But when you get to the level where I am, where you actually, you get paid, like sometimes the minimum is about 150 to 200 pounds a night, because, hey, I've invested a lot of money in my gear. I've invested years in learning how to play. This place that we have here isn't paid for by exposure. It's paid for by gigs, and you can do your charity events. There are certain things there you go, yeah, we're going to do this for a good cause. We do plenty of charity events for the year where we don't take anything for it, but people just say, oh yeah, it'll be great.
So to give people some context, the way that we make the Radiator Arms work, because the Radiator Arms is a new venture, it is a part of the JayEmm and Friends channel. It is monetized, but the reality is that even a podcast that for us performs very, very well might return revenue in the order of, what is it, 5 or 6 quid? Something like that.
Per episode at the moment. Yeah, it's not great. It's I think maybe a bit more than that.
Yeah.
I think the last time I looked, it was doing like about 70 quid a month, thereabouts.
Okay, yeah, for the Radiator Arms.
Yes, just
so that's £70 a month. Now
that doesn't even pay for my fuel.
That doesn't even pay for Ant's fuel to get here, although that's partly self-inflicted. The lunch that we're going to have between episodes, we record a pair at a time to make it more efficient. The lunch is probably going to come to about that, because Will's vegan and therefore difficult to feed, and I'm just greedy. So, that's at the minute, this is a loss-making exercise for all of us, but we do it because we enjoy it. Mm-hmm. And we know that many of the listeners enjoy it too, and those that don't, we hope maybe one day we'll convert you. But we get already very good feedback, very positive feedback from it, and so something we genuinely enjoy. We're also looking at it with a view to build it into something bigger. We have other ideas for how we're going to monetize this that are hopefully going to come to fruition in the very near future. We are working on that. And this is a part of starting any business, and YouTube really isn't any different. I would say to anybody that's looking to start a YouTube channel, and it doesn't matter what the topic is, there are several principles that you need to follow. First of which is have a plan. So if you're thinking about starting a YouTube channel, there's a good chance it's on a topic you're already interested in, which means you've probably already been watching lots of other YouTube content about similar stuff. So think first off, what are you going to do that's any different? How are you going to create something that's going to make people want to click on your video as opposed to one of the other dozens, if not hundreds of creators that already exist in the sphere you're in? And it doesn't matter whether it's makeup, movies, cars, old CRT televisions, doesn't matter. There'll probably be content out there already. If you're lucky and there's not, then ask a couple of questions. Is there no content out there because nobody's interested in it and therefore there's no point making it? Or is there no content out there because for some reason it's been ignored and you've discovered a hitherto untapped well of potential views? And if that's the case, how are you then going to find those viewers? Now, the algorithm doesn't really work the way that people thinks that it does. And to explain that a little bit better, I'm going to hand you over to the one of us that actually does understand it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, so I spent way too much time trying to understand the algorithm, mainly because I was trying to figure out, right, what do I do with all this data they give us in the analytics? So I ended up discovering that there's a person called Todd Beaupre, who is the product director for YouTube discovery. So basically how you end up seeing videos in your home feed and just about everywhere else you might discover a video, he's basically the person that knows exactly how it works. And the way that people think it works is, if it's a good video, it gets pushed. And that's not actually how it works. What happens is when you visit YouTube, YouTube understands what you like, what kind of stuff you watch typically at that time of day, what channels you've been watching videos of more recently. It also knows a little, because it knows about you and it knows other people who are like you, and it might know what content they've been watching. What it does is it pulls the content into your home feed that it thinks you would most likely want to watch now and next. And that is based on I think there's like hundreds, if not 1,000 odd different characteristics about you and the video content that it tries to understand. So it's not the way that people think. They think, oh, the videos get pushed. It's not. The videos get pulled. And if it's a very popular topic and people who have watched that video watched a lot of that video, so the more of the video they watch, the more likely YouTube is to conclude that that person enjoyed that video. If they then hit like, it says, oh, yeah, you like that video as well. And then if you comment, okay, now you've clearly found some satisfaction. They call it viewer satisfaction. You found satisfaction in this video. So the more you've engaged, the more you've watched it, the more you've engaged with it, the more satisfaction YouTube infers from that process. So then James has watched a video on an RX-8. YouTube knows that I'm interested in RX-8s because maybe I even just Googled it somewhere about RX-8s recently, or maybe I've watched a bunch of RX-8 content. It also knows that James has also been watching some Ferrari content, some Lamborghini content. I've been watching Ferrari and Lamborghini content. It says, oh, you two might be similar. He really enjoyed that video. I want to see if you will enjoy it as well. And it basically starts testing these videos on similar people until eventually it figures out how much satisfaction that video creates for people who match those characteristics. And each time another person comes along, it sucks that video onto their home screen.
Yep. The idea, the ultimate goal of the algorithm is to provide, it's to play Cilla Black effectively. It's a matchmaker between viewer and creator, and it wants to give the viewer a video that first off it thinks you're going to enjoy, but its ultimate goal is to keep you on YouTube, because as long as you're on YouTube, then you're making them money. Now, a few years ago, the way revenue was calculated was purely based on how many minutes did you watch? That was it. Those days are long, long gone. That wasn't even a thing when I started about 9 years ago. Now, other principles that you want to know about. Now, I was inspired by a channel run by a chap called JayEmm FYD, because I remember subscribing to him when he only had, I think, about 600 or 700 subscribers. And then his channel exploded. It grew to like nearly 100,000 pretty darn quickly. And that to me was the proof that I needed that it could work. I realized that Lotus was a brand that was had great recognition, had an amazing history, also is one that wasn't very far away from where I lived, and I figured that that would be a cool thing to sort of base your content on, because I figured what would be the best thing to do is to be the biggest fish in the little pond and then move over. It's one of the reasons why I didn't buy, say, an Audi R8, which is something I was thinking of, because by the time I would have bought one, everyone else has already done their R8 videos. I wouldn't have had anything new to bring to the table. I didn't buy a Ferrari because if it broke, I couldn't have afforded to have fixed it. That's why I waited a long time before I did. The biggest thing most people will never, ever do when, wanting to start YouTube is to actually get started. They will just never, ever take that first step of making the first video. And I think a large part of that centers around a fear of failure. Well, take one thing from me. If you're not making a video because you're worried that it's basically not going to be good and it's going to not do very well, don't worry, because it will be shit and it won't get watched. That's absolutely fine. Like, you are going to use your first probably year or two at least as basically a training ground. And trust me, if it does work for you, years later, you will come to appreciate the fact that maybe in those early days, not that many people were watching, because this is the time in which you're going to refine your craft, work out what it is that you do, work out actually the direction that the channel is going to take, because sometimes it's not the direction you think it's going to. I started my channel actually as a James on cars, cameras, and movies because they are my interests. Then I very quickly realized, and those that understand the algorithm will tell you, actually don't do that. Don't have a channel that's that broad, because it confuses the algorithm. It doesn't know what it is that you're making. Have one channel on cars, have one channel on cameras, have one channel on movies. It is extra work and hassle, but ultimately you'll probably find that maybe one of the three, if you're lucky, will work. I definitely didn't do myself any favors by choosing Lotus, which is a niche brand, but also because it's a slow growing thing. However, there is a benefit to this. I have seen a lot of other people that have built channels, and this is car specific, where it's focused on one brand, sometimes even one model. So you'll see somebody out there and they start off with a Fiesta ST, was a very, very popular car of a few years ago. So a lot of people started channels with Fiesta ST, and it'd be like, yeah, cool, I'm going to delete my rear wiper. I'm going to strip out the interior. I'm going to put a loud exhaust on. Now I'm going to go on a track day and wonder why on earth it is I've been kicked off the track day. And you can grow a channel really quickly because every single video that you make is going to appeal to the same audience. Every single video you make is going to appeal to people that have a Fiesta ST. And so I saw a lot of channels grow from much, much smaller than mine to much, much bigger than mine over a fairly short space of time.
But then they stop.
Because the problem is eventually you go, I don't want to drive around a Fiesta ST with pops and bangs anymore. I've done everything that I really want to do. I want to buy a Nissan. And then something happens, which is that you realize none of your audience are interested in Nissans at all. They like Fiesta STs. And in some ways, I think it's almost worse than starting again, because now what you have is a channel where your subscriber base isn't interested in any of the videos that you're making. So I believe, this has sort of been semi-confirmed, what happens is the algorithm is looking at your videos you're putting out, and it looks at it and goes, well, we know that normally a video from James might do 20k, let's say, if you're doing your Fiesta videos. And a good one will do 30k. Your good one does 30k, and then it goes, this must be a really good video. So it's one we're going to think about pushing to other people. And that's how you go from a video that does like 50k to suddenly a million. But if you've now changed what you do, and every single video you make is getting 1k, 2k, YouTube will just interpret that in a very basic way as going, well, these videos must be crap. Because your regular audience is choosing to not watch them. And so you'll find it's really hard to break out of that.
There's a lot of work that's been done over the last few years, actually, though, to try and address that a little bit. So one of the things that they've really emphasized lately is that they are now treating every video individually.
Yeah.
One characteristic is who the creator is, obviously. And if a creator has lots of people coming back and watching stuff, that's a significant factor, which is why it says, oh, well, you've watched loads of James's stuff. All these people have watched loads of James' stuff. Every time those people show up, it's like, well, you've watched a lot of James's stuff. We'll just pop that onto your feed straight away. But you still do have this issue where, because of that, if they then suddenly stop watching, you get the same issue, but it manifests in the way that you described it, but it happens because of what I described before about how
you've also got the
works.
basics of, if you've packaged yourself as that Fiesta guy and now you're not doing that kind of content, well, yeah, of course. I mean, you wouldn't walk into a newsagent and expect, classic and retro Ford to have a piece on a 370Z in it. Like,
no.
Even if it could be a great piece on the car that you'd really enjoy if you did read it, but if it's in the wrong place, you're not going to go looking for it. Other basic stuff, you just got to get the quantity up. You need at least a video a week. Realistically, if you want to grow a channel, you need 2 videos a week. That is my experience. That is not the hard and fast rule for everybody. And there will always be channels out there that in their very first video get 1 million followers. But that's not
hardly
normal. Yeah, that just doesn't normally happen. It's a lot of work goes into it. And also, you need to work out a way, because if the channel does get big, the way I look at it is this. Every single video that you make, certainly as a new channel, is an opportunity for a viral hit. It's an opportunity for your channel suddenly to become a thing. You make 2 videos a week as opposed to 1, you've just doubled chances of that happening. Also in the early days, it still happens now. I put out a video, maybe, doesn't do that well. If it's a whole week till your next one comes out, it's going to feel like that whole week is just a bit of a downer. Whereas if you're putting out 2 videos, you've got 2 chances that week for a video to do quite well. I then went from 2 to 3 a week, and I did notice a big improvement in viewership and revenue. And I then went from 3 videos to 4 videos a week. Now, when I did that, there was certainly an improvement in terms of the metrics, but nowhere near as much. I've subsequently gone back to 3 videos a week, and for me, I believe that is the optimum amount. Now, I do exclusively long-form content. I know there are lots of people out there who are really, really big into shorts. For me personally, and for the kind of content that I create, I think shorts are a bit of a dead end, because even a successful short just doesn't get you anywhere near the amount of revenue. I mean, to give you some context, shorts that do millions of views might generate the same revenue as a long-form video that does like 10, 20,000 views. It's really that brutal a difference just because of the way that short form content works. And the creators that are successful with short form content, they're having to make stuff sometimes even multiple times a day just to have the opportunity for it to go out there. And I think just the metrics and the mechanics, of the way that shorts work, it can be very hard to actually follow a subscriber. I'd rather have one person watch a half-hour video from start to finish than 1,000 people watch a short that I made, because to me it means more, and that person is more likely to come back for other content.
That's the thing that people say about shorts, is that often the characters in those shorts become almost anonymous, unless you are very much at the front and center, like a prankster or something.
Interesting about that. For a while before I deleted TikTok because it was ruining my brain and rotting it to pieces, during COVID times, I made shorts on the things, on TikToks basically, and some of them had hundreds and thousands, some of them even had millions of views, just silly little things. But did my follower base grow from that? No. Was there any of those people returning? Very unlikely.
I've also seen this on some of our fellow car content creators where they've had hit shorts and it's led to a massive jump in subscriber numbers, but it doesn't actually get them any more views. And in some ways, I'd hate that, because you're like, okay, cool, great. You've just doubled the number of subscribers you've got, but you're getting the same number of views. So now it just looks like you're half as successful, because now it just looks like you've got lots and lots of just, basically zombie subscribers that aren't watching your videos anymore.
It's worse than that. So I have a friend who, YouTube was a thing that he does on the side for fun. He has a full-time job, but for whatever reason, he decided he wanted a silver play button. Mm-hmm. And when Shorts was first kicking off, he basically took all this content that he'd created over the previous years and put on Instagram and put them out as shorts. And he grew his channel from something like 2,000 subscribers to 100,000 subscribers in 6 months.
Yeah.
He then put out a long form video. It got 1,000 views from 100,000 subscribers. Wow. Now, this is where a lot of people, I think, get confused about what subscribing to a channel means, because it used to mean something. It was like, I want you to show me more stuff like this, because in the early days, the homepage was the videos from your subscribers. That's now been moved to a separate tab where you have to explicitly look at the bottom, click on subscribed channels to see your subscriber feed. That used to be the home screen. Most people don't do that. A very, very small number of people actually go there. Now, really, when you're subscribing to the channel, it's more like a channel like. That's is how it's treated. And I was, again, going back to Todd Bupre, who, by the way, he says, if you talk about the algorithm, replace that word with the audience, and you might get something useful out of what you've just said. But he was saying that, whether you're subscribed to a channel is actually now one of the lowest weighted factors in whether or not a video will appear on your home feed.
It's really interesting you mention that, because obviously doing it now, and I was saying compared to when I was originally doing it, very different. I'm still in the mindset of the first place I go to when I watch a YouTube and I log on for the day is the subscription box. But that's because I'm quite old school.
That is very old fashioned.
I do. The people I subscribe to, I actually, actively go to the subscription page to watch their videos. And obviously I do consume a lot of content from the home feed. And that's how I found you originally.
Yeah.
It's one of those, that's how you find new people. But it's interesting. What would you say the percentage of your actual kind of views come from the subscription page compared to the kind of like suggested page?
The actual subscription page is minuscule. Yeah. So one thing I also want to say, because a lot of people ask this, and it's very important to understand, people always think the subscribers somehow pay you money. They don't at all. If you have 1 million subscribers and no views, you're getting no money. If you have 1 million views and no subscribers, you're going to get some money. However, it's a little bit more complicated than that. The three things I think that you get from having more subscribers is, first off, I am certain that it does get you more revenue, because the videos I do now that say do 100,000 views, compared to when I had a tenth the number of subscribers, I definitely get more money. Now, there are many factors influencing that. In the early days, I didn't even run mid-roll ads. And the reason I did that is because what I wanted was people to watch more of my videos. I knew I wasn't going to be earning much money. And my theory was, every time you get played an ad on YouTube, it's a reminder to the viewer that you could be watching something else. So I figured, you know what? Like, I've never watched a single Facebook video ever beyond the first ad, because they're almost always not worth watching. So I didn't run mid-roll ads for ages, and I eventually turned it back on in COVID when my view numbers were going up and my revenue was going down, because that's what happened in 2020. The reality was I felt like an idiot for not having turned it on earlier, because I think about 2 people noticed and I got a lot more money. So I think I've just been depriving myself of revenue.
Also, does YouTube only give out ads to people that they're willing to accept an amount of ads before they click off things? Is that a thing
that is taken into account? Yeah,
That's a new thing, yeah.
Yeah, it is now anyway. Yeah, and they're doing it more so now, more than ever, where they are giving us less control over.
Yeah, it's something we're fighting with, because I used to, in every single video, I would place where I wanted an ad and how many, and I would never put as many in as Google would want. But now it's a little less clear, and I'm still working out, because obviously we still want to get money, but I also would like the viewer to have a good experience watching my video, whether they appreciate it or not. But yeah, they're not making things easy.
We had a comment about this on the podcast on one of the videos, didn't we? And people were saying, there's too many adverts. We've got no control over that, I'm afraid.
And again, it is much more to do with the viewer as to how many ads are shown than it is to do with us.
Yes.
Yep.
Because even when you were placing the ads in the very specific spots, that's not a guarantee that an ad will be played. It's just that you're telling YouTube, this is a good point in the video, that if you're going to show an ad, that's the point to do it. It actually then makes the decision more on the viewer in terms of their tolerance for ads, whether they're likely to skip it. Have they earned their keep by watching enough ads yet? You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
These are the factors that come into play there.
So the other two things with having more subscribers is you get this lovely sense of well-being and accomplishment, because, you know, whenever you tell anybody that you're a YouTuber, it's a much more accepted thing to be these days than it was before. But I hated it when I said, oh, you're a YouTuber. How many subscribers you got? And you'd be like, you're like 12? You know, and once it gets to about 50,000, 50,000 was a number I was very happy to quote to me. 50,000 is like that's a proper concern there. So there's that. But also, when you're approaching sponsors, that's where it makes a big difference, because they're getting a little smarter now, but by and large, the one thing they'll always want to know, and also, in my case, getting cars from car companies. You approach a company, you go, hey, so Jaguar, for example, I went to them in the early days, said, can I have a car? And they said, no, you're too small. So I said, okay, what's not too small? And they said, get to 50,000 subs, come back. And when I got to like 49,500, I went back to them and said, hey, you said when I got to 50K subs, you might be able to sort me out. I'm here now. And they went, all right, what do you want? So, you know, so there's that.
I think this is something that I've seen talked about quite a lot by, again, going back to Todd that I mentioned before from YouTube. This is something that they're kind of really looking at, because they themselves feel like actually showing the subscriber count isn't as useful. There's been some conversations possibly about changing that to something like monthly unique viewers or returning viewers, that sort of thing. I mean, and if they did, then your numbers would be even bigger. I mean, so would mine. On Sports and Touring, 10,000 subscribers, I get about 40 to 50,000 viewers a month. You get millions.
Yeah, so to give you some context, like, my subscriber number is 400-something thousand.
436.
But my unique viewers per month is between 1 and 1.5 million. So that kind of gives you a better idea of the scope of the channel.
There was one last thing I wanted to go about, winding it back, and I was talking about subscriber watch page now versus previous. And as a creator, you notice more. Back then, your subscribers were the people that, for the most part, were watching your video. There was a lot more of like the returning views, and back then there'd be all the same people in the comment sections. And I know you get a bit of that now. Probably, I'm sure you've got some faces you can think people you recognise in the comment section of every video.
You get quite a relationship with some of them sometimes. Like you see them popping up, and you half the time you know what they're going to say. It's really, really nice. I mean, especially in the really early days of the channel, like you feel like you know every single one of your subscribers.
And do you know what's actually nice to me? I've still got a few people from almost day one that still watch the videos I put out now, and that is 19 years ago. And I still appreciate that. That is so nice to see.
I had I met some lad recently, and I think he was about 18 or so, and he's like, "Oh, wow, I've been watching your videos since I was like 9 years old." I was like, "No, you take that back right now." Like, you know, he's like, "Oh, I was in school when I watched your videos. Now I've got a car." You're like, "No, don't do that to me."
Oh, that's actually pretty cool though. But that makes me feel better because I am the old one here. One last thing on the idea of the business of YouTube. We've talked about a few different things. We talked about actually what most people would consider an unexpected source of revenue, which is people actually paying to use your footage. The more obvious one, where we get a slice of the ad revenue, 55%, which from a point of view of other social platforms is actually better than
Twitch.
Yep, and better than Twitch take like 30.
Twitch take 50%.
50%, that's it.
Yeah.
And TikTok, I think, they take something like 60% or something crazy like that. Can't remember the details now. But ad revenue, that's the other factor. You also talked about integrations, sponsorships, that sort of thing. And there's one other, which is often used, which is merch. So often you build a brand like JayEmm.
Yep.
You would then want to potentially sell merch. I know you have a shop at the moment, but it so happens that we will be having some merch coming for the podcast soon. So if that's something you're interested in, let us know in the comments. We've got a couple of ideas which are kind of on brand that we will be sharing with you soon. So watch this space.
And as it happens, by the way, people do often ask us why it is that we release on YouTube first, considering that this is a podcast. Well, I should tell you the main reason for me. It's not that we make really any more money on here, because we do make some money on here, but as we've already discussed, it's a very small amount. What it is because YouTube is the easiest way for us to get your comments. Because you see, I get emailed every day with comments from this and previous videos. Whereas on Spotify and Amazon and Apple, there isn't really an easy way for people to comment. In fact, I'm not sure there is a way for people to comment on something on Spotify and stuff like that. So this is a really good way for us to interact more directly and more immediately with you, the audience. And on that topic, yesterday, I put up an Instagram story saying we were going to be doing something about the business of YouTube and business. Could people ask us some questions? So I'm going to read some out now. Mr. Haramon asks, what direction do I think it will go in and how long do I see myself doing it for? Well, I see myself doing it for quite some time. Don't know about you guys. But I also think YouTube is becoming ever more professional. Do you remember what the YouTube page used to look like 10 years ago? One of the reasons I didn't like YouTube was it looked so janky and so low rent. Like it was when it was all Vivo videos and stuff like that. It was a bit crap.
It was even worse than like 2005, 2006. It was even directly competing back then with Google Videos. Do you remember that platform?
Yep.
Google had their own video platforms. They had Google Plus as well, but we don't talk about that.
Okay, so here's a good one from JRahimo4. One niggle about doing cars as a YouTube topic that you absolutely hate. Insurance, for example. Yeah, here in Britain, insurance is a big problem, and it's a real barrier to entry because the way insurance works here, basically in other countries, if someone's got a car and they say you can drive it, you're insured. That's not how it is here. My insurance is £5,000 a year. It's a cost of business, but it is something that I do. There are ways around it that you can do. Certainly if you're starting out and you're not doing many cars and you're not doing them that frequently, there are ways you can get insured on a case-by-case basis. And if to begin with, you're not making money out of it, there are certain things that then allows you to do. If you're not monetizing, it does have advantages. But yeah, what about you guys? What's a niggle for you with it?
I don't know, I suppose. Yeah, worries about things like insurance and stuff like that was definitely a big factor. I think when you think about it, we've talked about the business of YouTube, and you have to think of it like a business if you're doing it full time. I wasn't. I was doing it as a kind of what I called a hobby. Then it became a hobby business. Now it's starting to shift in the other direction and becoming more of a business hobby. But it's very expensive. Like you look at a lot of YouTubers that you see today, they'll sit in front of a desk and they will talk to camera, and that is the cheapest content that you can possibly make.
Yep.
I know you do that from time to time. You've been telling me I need to do more of it. But, you've got fuel, you've got, if it's your own cars, like tires and whatnot.
Well, this is why I always say to people wanting to start with car stuff, like, don't make all your content you doing work on your car, because that is always going to involve you spending lots of money, and it's going to take forever before you can return that revenue. You need to do something with minimal overheads, because the lower the overhead, the quicker you get into profit.
Yeah.
This is one of the reasons why I've enjoyed kind of making the tech videos again, is because that old iMac that sits behind us and is part of kind of the set, I got given that. I spent maybe £20 on an SSD and some filament for my 3D printer to make that thing work again. And, that was a pretty well-received video. It's the same with the old Mac Pro. My highest video on the channel at the moment is one where I bought a Mac Pro from CEX for £170. I got that and I did that up, and I then sold that on afterwards, made all of my money back on the actual purchase of materials and the machine. And then I pretty much had the profit from the ad revenue that I got from that.
I do similar things with cars, actually. Some of the MGs and stuff I bought recently. The car itself, I aim to make no money on. The money I make is from the videos. All right. Sparky1807 says, for every hour in front of the camera, how many hours does it take behind the scenes?
Oh, God.
I once calculated that for an average review video, the process from end to end was about 8 hours. Now, one of my filming locations is only about a half an hour round trip. The other one is a 5-hour round trip. So I basically split the difference. The actual filming process itself for me is about 2 hours. The editing process for the same video is 2 hours. Plus you then have, downloading of footage, charging batteries, travel time, and all that. So to get you a 30-minute video is probably 8 hours.
And I think we should say this is a very carefully refined process that James has arrived at over many years. I am not there yet. I can't do a whole video in a total of 8 hours. I think the fastest video I did at all, I think I was coming here and I basically just rigged up and talked about gearboxes or something like that. That video was total journey time, rigging up time, all of that stuff was probably, and then driving was probably about an hour and 15. And then the editing process took me about, it was about a day. I think it was the quickest I've ever done anything. And when I say a day, a working day, that's like 10 hours. So I think my best, shortest, fastest, easiest to edit video end to end was easily 12, 14 hours.
My longest edit, I think, was 3 days.
My longest edit is definitely longer than that. It's like 5 days.
Yeah, it's interesting.
5 long days.
It's one of the reasons I actually film on iPhones rather than the cameras. Is because for my kind of content, and actually the content I've shot for the JayEmm and Friends channel, the way I've done it, it's actually worked out pretty well. But because I'm in the Apple ecosystem, it's really easy just to film it. I plug in my lav mics with the USB receiver into it, and then I airdrop it over to my computer, and then it's just on there, and I can keep the footage in iCloud as a backup until I'm done with it. And then once the video is out, and I'm happy with the upload at the moment, because I don't have lots of storage, I just delete the source media. And for me, that works quite well.
That's the least of my worries, transferring the data. To be honest with you, like for me, like I know, here's a couple of differences between myself and James. One, James is way more practiced. So he can do I've seen him work on a bad day, he'll do 4 takes of something. But on a typical day, I would say his average is like 1.6 takes average, right? And that means that he just gets through that part quickly. The second thing is his technical knowledge of cameras means that he fixes most of everything in advance in camera. So the post-production overheads are minimal.
That's why I use an iPhone, because for the most part, everything is kind of good enough on the shot, unless you're having. I have issues when I film CRT TVs, and I have issues with some of the LED lights. But for the most part, the colours that come out of an iPhone are what people expect because that's what they see on social media anyway, and they're good enough for me at the moment to just get myself making content.
Yeah. And then the other part, I think, is that James has made, you got 1,600 videos now?
Yeah, about that.
Yeah.
So people talk about how long have you been on YouTube. How long you've been on YouTube is not important. It's how many videos have you made. A guy called Roberto Blake talks that when you start, expect to make 100 crappy videos. That's how you learn. It's along the lines of what you were saying earlier. I've made, I think, a grand total, and I'll include videos I made for Damani's channel prior to that. I think I'm in and around the 300 mark, which is a very, very small proportion of the videos you've made.
Yeah, but I was probably 400 to 500 videos in before I started making money.
Also, yeah, that's true. Yeah, 100%. Oh yeah, hundreds of videos in before you start making money. And but the other side of it, from in terms of your speed, is that when you did start that, you came from years of experience and having been trained by an Oscar-winning editor or Oscar-nominated editor.
He's very bitter about that.
Oscar-nominated. Sorry, my bad. But so my speed of editing, essentially, if you think about it, what you're doing is you're making a series of decisions about stuff to keep. Most of it you're trying to get rid of, and then you're trying to keep stuff. I've seen James edit, and he makes that decision like so far at the back of his mind, he's not even consciously aware of it. It's just happening. Whereas with me, I'm having to think about it still quite consciously. So I think it's a combination of training, experience, and the other part, I think, is you focused on it from day one. When you went into YouTube, you said, right, that's it. I'm doing this like a business. I'm going to invest a bunch of money and time, assume I'm not going to make any money for years, and eventually trust that it will make a return. And that's what happened. Whereas I've gone about it as it's been a part-time thing that I do on my evenings and my weekends, which is a totally different way of attacking it.
Yeah. And also, I was in the fortunate position where I managed to build myself up in a little nest egg with my previous career, so I could just focus solely on YouTube. Also, I didn't have the luxury of like a regular, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday job. So it wasn't like I gave up stability and security. I did the odd freelance gig for a few years afterwards just to kind of keep things topped up. And I know that there are other people that won't be able to do that. But, and I think this is the reality of any business. Not everybody is cut out for it. Mm-hmm. I was lucky. I started when I had no kids, no wife, and I was in a situation where I could take a really big risk. I think I've said before, I had the luxury of knowing that if it really went that wrong, I wasn't going to be homeless. And that's a luxury that not many people have. And so I can understand that people might need to do this alongside doing your regular 9 to 5. And so if you're going to do that and you really want it to work, you are going to have to make sacrifices.
Oh, yeah.
For years, I did not play video games. Maybe 10, 15 minutes a week, tops, if I could find the time. But I'd do a long day, come home, start editing. I've had plenty of 7 till 10 days. 7 a.m. to 10 a.m., 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., because that's what I wanted to do. And I was determined that this was going to work. And so if you're the sort of person that wants to make one video a month and not really put that much effort into it, it's never going to take off. It's never going to work. Even worse, if it did take off, you probably wouldn't be in a position where you could then leverage what then happens. So, you've got to make sacrifices. It is a hard job. And that is why it is still possible to be successful on YouTube, because the barrier of entry is still quite high. It's the same it always has been. People do it for a year on and off and go, this hasn't really worked.
Yeah.
And then they give up. You can't.
They do it part-time for a year and then say that it hasn't worked and complain. It's like, that's just great. I mean, just for context, only 4% of channels on YouTube exceed 10,000 subscribers. When you get to 400,000 subscribers, 100,000 subscribers, it's a fraction of a 1% of all channels ever exceed 100,000 subscribers. I mean, it is hard, and people start lots of channels and then they quit.
Yeah, it's easily done. All right, H1 says, have you ever had emails trying to get you to promote unusual or scammy stuff? Every day.
Yeah.
Every single day. I'll have had one while we were recording this. So Jambomb3 wants to know, at what at what point did the process escalate from making a few quid to making it big? Basically 2021, 2022, about 4 years in. So after the McLaren video went big, and then sort of the next 2 years, it was a very odd time because COVID. But yeah, I'd say it took a lot less time. It took more time to go from making nothing to breaking even than it did from breaking even to making what I would call a decent living.
I'm still working on that part.
Yeah. Flaky James wants to know, how did I find the determination and the thought I could succeed with my own business? I didn't think about it. I just did it. McPherson Graham says, my wife is starting a travel consultancy business. Should she use YouTube to promote it? I'm going to say yes, but not in the way that you think. Don't start a YouTube channel for your own business because that is a huge amount of time, effort, and energy. Instead, use the time, effort, energy, and money to work with existing YouTubers who have already done the hard work to see how they could promote your business, because then people will be more open to the fact it's just a promotion. And I think you might get better return on revenue.
I would say, however, do check out someone called Ed Lawrence. He specializes in helping to grow businesses around YouTube channels, and he's had a lot of success with relatively small channels that don't put out a huge amount of content, but then can use that to actually sell their business. Sometimes it's not quite the same model as it would be for trying to make your money from YouTube. If you're trying to make money from the business, there's lots of other little things that having a YouTube channel can help with that you don't have to then take all of your time away
Absolutely. From. And long before YouTube made me money, it did give me opportunities that I maybe couldn't have even bought with money, and also gets you discounts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Carl Cheesecake wants to know, is there a clear point where it changes from a hobby to a business? I'd say yes. The day you decide it's not a hobby, it's a business. Pretty simple.
It's about how much effort you then start putting into it. Like, for example, I'm actually now doing this more than I was doing my previous day job, because I am now trying to turn this into a business. But I am where James was, back in those first few years, not making very much money from it at all.
Carnitty wants to know, how does YouTube revenue stream work alongside financial commitments such as mortgages or car payments? For me, it's very simple. I made sure that the YouTube revenue got to the point where it was comfortably enough so that even on a really, really bad month, I could have safely afforded to have made any monthly commitments that I had. And it was only when I actually was making really good money from YouTube, I even got a car on finance. Never had a car on finance until I was doing YouTube, because actually, maybe my situation is unique. Because before I didn't have a 9-to-5, I worked as a self-employed cameraman. My income was incredibly uneven. So I never had monthly income until I did YouTube.
But I was just going to say, it's the same as if you had any other business. Like, you'd have to show your accounts for your business to a mortgage provider or to financial services to show them that you will be able to afford the loans.
Dave Nine Dart says, when you collaborate with other YouTubers, do you share the profits from the views or sponsorship? No, you don't. You get the money from your video, and the way it generally works is that if you do a collaboration with somebody, you're probably each going to get a video out of it. And, or if somebody has, say, lent me a car, Ant gives me his Gallardo for a video, he's going to get a mention. As a smaller channel, this is a way that you can often get some traction, is by finding bigger channels in the same sphere. In the car world, if you've got an interesting car that other big channels might be interested in, I always have people come to me and ask about, doing stuff together. And as long as they've clearly put some effort in, then it's not as bad. And last one here from WHD Sams. He says, is it awkward speaking to manufacturers after you've reviewed a proper stinker of a car? No, it shouldn't be. Some manufacturers make it really awkward, but that's very, very few of them, because, it's not like... I would feel worse if... I actually thought about this the other day. I would feel much worse being like a restaurant critic, because most car companies are quite large entities. So if I go and drive, I don't know, let's just say an Urus, right? I've not driven one. If I drove it and I said, this is crap, I don't understand why anybody buys one, I'm not going to affect the sales of it. I'm not going to dent the sales of that. Like, I'm not going to make a single difference to anybody that works for that company. Maybe they'd get shirty with me. I mean, I did review a Lamborghini once. They haven't given me another one since. But ultimately, you're not going to make a difference to the company. If you're a food critic and you go to a local restaurant and you go, this restaurant's horrible, or maybe even worse, you're like, I was sick after I went there. You're like, you could put somebody out of business.
That could be the end of it. I want to give one little shout out though to one brand that I think that my respect for that brand went up massively, and it was around a time when you had the Porsche Boxster 4-litre GTS. I helped you film that, and I made a video as well. And that was after you'd had another car and said that the steering was rubbish.
Yes.
And they said, "Oh, well, here, have another one.
Yeah.
See if that's any better.
Try it again." Yeah.
And then I think a little bit later they then sent you another car, which they thought it wasn't the same car. It was like not the same model. It was a different model. Say, well, what do you think of that one? And you were like, "Oh, actually, no, the steering's great on this." That to me is a brand that is not just interested in you promoting them, because there are some I've seen through colleagues in the business that will send, before they send you a car, they'll want you to sign this contract that says you're not going to say bad things. And it's like they're treating it like you're getting a free rental in exchange for saying nice things about us.
Stuff.
I know you don't do it. The reason I got to see it was because another YouTuber said, "Can you believe this? They're trying to do this." So they turned the car down. But it's not. They wanted the feedback.
Yeah.
They wanted to make sure that your feedback wasn't just about that specific vehicle and actually did apply to that model overall. Then they wanted to make sure that it didn't just apply to that model, and that maybe there's another car to see if it did solve the steering problem. Now, if I was in their shoes, I'd be taking that information back and saying, right, more steering like that, less steering like that.
I mean, it's nice when companies are like that, but the general consensus I've found, having spoken now directly to a lot of PR people, a lot of different companies, the one thing most of them seem to agree on is it's okay for you to not like our car. Just explain why. If you drive it and you say, "I don't like this because I think the suspension is too stiff and I think the sidewall on these tires is too small, and therefore over the roads that I'm driving it on, this doesn't work for me," cool. Whereas if you just make a video and go, "It's crap, I don't like it," then that's when they're not going to give you another car. Because if you just got, "I don't like it and I don't really know why," then what do they do with that information? You've not done your job, so why should they give you another car?
And every review is just someone's opinion based on where they are, who they are, their personal preferences and tastes. James could drive a car and say, "This suspension is way too stiff," and I'll be like, "Woohoo, I'm in my happy place."
That happens quite regularly.
That's true. That's true.
All the time. Like, honestly, I'll phone Anne and be like, "Anne, I drove this car today. I hated it. You're going to love it."
And I think that's a great place to wrap things up.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for watching. If you haven't done so already, please like and comment down below. You know why, because we explained it earlier.
Yeah.
And I think that you should be watching this space for future merch that might be coming available soon. Anything else you want to add, boys?
Yeah, I wanted to add that I think it would be quite a fun thing to do, not as a podcast, but as a video on this channel, kind of like a series, like a little thing about how a video, maybe a JayEmm video is made from start to finish.
I've done it and people don't watch it.
Yeah, they don't care.
No.
They ask for it. People ask for it, then they don't watch it.
They say they want it, they don't want it.
So what we're ascertaining today is the audience don't know what they want.
No, they don't.
The data disagrees with them.
Like, let's speak to petrol heads. They tell you they hate crossovers. What do they buy?
Crossovers.
Fair enough.
Car companies would not make them if people didn't buy them.
And on that bombshell, goodbye.
Goodbye.
All right, let's get some lunch.
Yeah.
That was a long one.
No, it wasn't. We started late.